They locked the front door from the inside, refusing to let me in. I knelt at the door, humbly pleading for them to let us in, while inside they enjoyed the air conditioning, eating ice cream and frozen watermelon. My daughter and I were left to succumb to the heat at the doorstep. When I opened my eyes again, I received another call from my mother pleading to stay temporarily, wishing they would meet their end. I responded indifferently. Let my brother and his wife come over for a few days. I actually missed them. This time, I planned to indulge with my daughter, watching them slowly despair and succumb to the heat. Mommy, what's wrong? I clenched my teeth, my eyes bloodshot, my body couldn't stop shaking. The phone screen was nearly crushed in my hand, showing several jagged cracks. Mommy, don't be like this. Mang is scared. Hearing my daughter Meng's tender cries, I snapped out of my overwhelming hatred, remembering how she suffered from heat burns in her last life. Her body red and blistered, my heart almost broke. I squatted down and held my little daughter tightly, hugging her closer and closer. My eyes stung unbearably, and tears couldn't help but pour down. Thank goodness, Meng and I have been reborn the day before the deadly heat wave. I hadn't fully recovered from the shock when my mother's call came again. Unlike her earlier subdued weeping, this time she questioned with a blaming tone, Vera, why haven't you sent the address yet? I've already spoken with your brother and his wife. They didn't want to come initially, but seeing your sincerity, they agreed to visit. Make sure you take good care of them. Your sister-in-law is carrying our family's precious grandchild. Whatever she requests, you must agree to it. Do you hear? Also, your brother wants a seafood feast. Get that ready too. He's been craving it badly. In my past life, it was the same. After successfully obtaining my address, they started making all kinds of unreasonable demands. I initially didn't want them to stay, but she said my dad had a severe heart attack and might not make it, wanting me to be with him in his last days. Even if I didn't want to have anything to do with them, I couldn't just refuse entry to my dying father. But just half an hour after I sent the address, their whole family arrived with bags packed and took over my house. My dad didn't seem like he had a heart condition at all. He didn't even change his shoes, briskly walked around my house, nodding in satisfaction. Later, I found out that my dad never had a heart disease. They conspired to deceive me, just to forcefully take over my house. Since my sister-in-law was pregnant, they threatened that without a house, she would go to the hospital and abort their precious grandchild. I refused to transfer the house to them, so they plotted to kill me. As the deadly heat wave approached, supplies at home became scarce. They forced me to go out repeatedly to gather supplies. When the outdoor temperature reached a terrifying 70 degrees, I refused to risk going out again. While I was cooking, they lured my 5-year-old daughter out of the house, after a struggle to find her downstairs, suffering from sunburn, but they locked the front door from the inside, refusing to let me come home. Kneeling at the door, I pounded on it desperately, pleading for them to let us in, if we didn't cool down soon. My daughter would truly succumb to the heat. I even warned them that the air conditioning system would eventually fail, and that I had a safer place for long-term refuge. They were convinced I was lying just to get inside. Inside, they sat in air-conditioned comfort, savoring chilled desserts to beat the heat, while mocking me with their words. My brother Lawson, who had been a parasite on me for 28 years, sneered, "Sis, don't bother. It's nice knowing I can kill you without lifting a finger. Did you really think I'd be foolish enough to let you in and share our food and house with you?" His wife cackled loudly, "Big sister, your husband is already dead, and your daughter will soon be too. Just give up and join them. I'll take care of inheriting your wealth and jewelry, rest assured." Ha ha ha. My mother, feigning sympathy, sighed, "Vera, don't blame your parents. If anyone blame your bad luck for marrying such a doomed man," my father said viciously. "Vera, just go die already. Once you're dead, the house will belong to Lawson." My daughter stopped breathing entirely, filled with rage and hatred. I wanted to tear them apart and devour their flesh piece by piece, but all I could do was wail helplessly. Amid their endless curses and humiliations, I screamed in despair and closed my eyes unwillingly. "Hello, Vera, are you listening to me?" Struggling to keep my voice calm amid the surging hatred, I said, "Mom, Meng and I are at my in-laws' place. I've given you the address, but you can't get in without the keys. Wait until I've cleaned up the rooms, then you can come over." Why are you even going back to his house after he's been dead for over a year? My mom suddenly raised her voice. Are you giving money to that crazy woman again? Huh, I'm telling you. Before she could finish, my dad grabbed the phone. Ungrateful girl. You have money to give to strangers but not to honor your own parents. Are you out of your mind? Lawson added furiously, seriously sick in the head. My dad continued to yell, get that money back immediately, all of it. Check if they have any good wine left too and bring a couple of bottles for me. Just send us 5,000 first. We need to stay in a hotel. I don't even have money for my medical bills. And you, an unfilial daughter, don't even care about your own father. Even before seeing them, my dad's greedy, arrogant, and ugly face flooded my mind. Make sure the house is ready for us when we get back. Your sister-in-law is pregnant and needs the biggest room with the softest bed. Got it. They were hastening to their own demise. And who was I to refuse? Okay, Dad, you and Mom rest well at the hotel, and I'll call you once I'm back. I transferred 10,000 directly to my dad. He accepted it immediately. With that much money, they would enjoy the big city life for a while. Hopefully, they wouldn't bother me for at least 3 days. It was time for me to stock up on supplies. If they wanted my house, they'd have to be alive to claim it. My husband had started his business in the liquor trade, and when we bought this house, we also acquired a 200 square meter basement and converted it into a wine cellar. The cellar was warm in winter and cool in summer, maintaining a constant temperature of 15 degrees Celsius. Extreme temperatures could adversely affect the quality of the liquor. The cellar's air conditioning and insulation systems were well maintained, and it was also designed to be moisture and mold resistant. Solar panels were installed along the corner of the first floor, ensuring that even in a power outage, the wine cellar would be unaffected. Previously, my husband mentioned, the wine cellar is capable of withstanding temperatures as high as 60 to 70 degrees Celsius and as low as minus 40 to 50 degrees Celsius. The day I died was the 10th day of a heat wave. The temperature soared to 70 degrees. In my rush to find my daughter, I never imagined they had no plans of letting me return home. The keys to the wine cellar were left at home. Now, what I need to do is stall them while I stock up on supplies during this time. I first called my in-laws, falsely claiming I had an urgent matter to attend to, asking them to look after the children for a few days. Explaining the real reason for them to take refuge would be hard for the elderly to accept. In my previous life, I was too careless when the heat wave struck, thinking it would pass in a few days. So I only advised the old couple to take care against the heat and stay indoors. I don't know if they survived that natural disaster. Over the years, my in-laws have placed unconditional trust in me, and they arrived within an hour. I left my child, Meng Meng, in the care of my mother-in-law. I explained to my father-in-law that I wanted to enhance the heat insulation of the wine cellar and convert it into a space suitable for long-term living. My father-in-law, who was a construction worker, had overseen the cellar's renovation himself. The secrecy of the project was well maintained, and the security measures were impeccable. To this day, no one knows what this space is used for. I mentioned that the recent temperatures were abnormal and it's best to be prepared. He didn't ask much but suggested his own ideas. A 200 square meter living area was too large. It could be divided into smaller sections, with changes to the air conditioning system for separate control. The living area's temperature should be maintained between 19 to 24 degrees Celsius. Furthermore, using materials with good insulation properties, the inner walls should be restructured. Also, connect the previously reserved water pipes to install a flushing toilet and build a simple restroom. A smoke duct linked to the chimney would solve the cooking issue. Choosing shade-tolerant indoor plants like pothos or spider plants not only purifies the air but also helps reduce indoor temperatures through transpiration. With my father-in-law overseeing this, I felt reassured. With time pressing, we divided the tasks. He took charge of reinforcing the wine cellar, while I handled the stockpiling. When my husband was seriously ill, we spent all our savings on his medical treatment. For over a year, Meng Meng and I have been living off the sale of various expensive wines left by my husband. I sold the wine in batches at slightly lower prices than usual, eventually gathering over 8 million in revenue. I transferred 500,000 to my father-in-law for purchasing building materials. The emptied wine racks were perfect for storing supplies. I alerted the property management of my residential complex in advance about renovating my home and that building materials would be entering the complex soon. After lunch, I quickly drove to the grain and oil market, taking advantage of current stable prices. I stocked up on rice, flour, oil, and smokeless coal, plus a large quantity of dried kelp, dried shiitake mushrooms, dried wood ear mushrooms, dried seaweed, dried fruits, and other dry goods, and 2 folding bamboo beds. I placed nearly 100,000 worth of orders across 4 stores, claiming I was preparing to stock a supermarket. To avoid suspicion, I set strict timelines for them, ensuring that my goods would be delivered to a warehouse I had recently rented behind the complex at staggered times today. If delivered on time, I promised a generous bonus. Driven by the prospect of money, they nodded vigorously, agreeing to ensure the task was completed. My father-in-law called 2 reliable apprentices to help us transfer the stock into the construction material truck, drive it into the complex, and directly into the wine cellar. We worked together until 2 a.m. to settle all the stock and building materials. To show my appreciation, I gave each of them 2 bottles of premium mutai and an additional 50,000 as a hardship fee. I promised them an extra 100,000 in wages once they helped my father-in-law finish remodeling the wine cellar. I also reminded them to stock up on food at home. After a night of repairs, early the next morning, my father-in-law and his 2 apprentices were busy in the wine cellar. I continued to shuttle between various malls, supermarkets, and convenience stores. I purchased over 100 boxes of instant noodles, several hundred self-heating rice meals and hot pots, and over 100 boxes of mineral water, canned goods, and compressed biscuits. Countless fresh vegetables are vacuum-packed, various snacks and drinks have piled up into a small mountain in the warehouse. There are health products for the elderly, vitamins, calcium tablets, common medicines, band-aids, bandages, and antiseptic solutions, as many cooling patches and herbal concoctions as we need to relieve the heat. To pass the time, there are Lego sets, chess, Go, darts, and projection sports equipment. Thinking of the unpredictable human nature in a crisis, I've also stocked up on mace, stun guns, Swiss Army knives, flashlights, and candles. At night, we repeated our old tricks, pulling the goods into the wine cellar under the cover of building materials. After a day of rushing work, the living area was separated from the storage area. The previously used wine racks are now in the storage area, piled high with food I've bought. The insulation on the inner walls has also solidified. My father-in-law even built a simple stove and sink. The bathroom is also completed with running water. Inside the storage area, there is a water tank that is 1.5 meters high and 5 meters long. Seeing these supplies, enough to sustain our family in the wine cellar for a year or even longer, I finally felt at ease. Day 3. I was still at home packing clothes to move to the wine cellar when my mother called. Vera, is everything packed? Hurry and send me the address. We'll come over after lunch. I thought they wouldn't contact me until tomorrow. It seems I need to hurry. Okay, I'll send it right now. My mom continued. Oh right, transfer another 2,000 yuan to your brother. We're having a seafood feast. It's 1,800 yuan. Expensive, but really delicious. It's only thanks to your brother that we get to enjoy such good things. I've grown accustomed to such shameless comments. Mom, didn't I just give you 10,000 yuan? Did you spend it all already? Before my mom could respond, my dad burst out furiously. You ungrateful girl, still holding onto the money after giving it. Do you think 10,000 yuan is a lot? You worthless, money-sucking creature. Other girls would rather work a year abroad and send home 200,000 or 300,000 yuan. And you're the most useless. I should have strangled you at birth and saved the money spent on you. He ranted endlessly, and I could hear over the phone that Lawson and his wife were slurping seafood and giggling, repeating my dad's insults. My dad always manages to make me feel even more miserable when I am already desperate. In my previous life, I might have still cared about the faint blood ties, but now, they are merely my enemies. Lambs to the slaughter. My mom, seemingly intervening on my behalf, commanded in a firm tone, your dad has a weak heart, don't make him angry anymore, hurry up and transfer the money. I transferred the money to Lawson, who, just like my dad, accepted the transfer instantly without saying a word. In their eyes, spending my money is natural. No, they don't think they're spending my money, they consider it their own, because my parents always say, "What's mine is Lawson's, enjoy it." Because this is the last grand meal you'll ever have. The mother-in-law knew my parents were coming and didn't want to meet them. She initially wanted to return home, but there was still some finishing work to be done in the wine cellar, so she decided to help my father-in-law instead. I held her hand. I slipped the key to the wine cellar into her palm, promising her that I would soon join them to live together. At 2 in the afternoon, my parents, Lawson, and my sister-in-law were fiercely banging on the front door. There was a doorbell right there, but it was as if they were all blind and couldn't see it. I had barely cracked the door open when Lawson kicked it wide open. The door slammed against the wall and bounced back violently. Even though I dodged quickly, my shoulder was still struck by the door, and for a moment, it felt as if my bones had cracked from the pain. Crouching down, I clutched my shoulder, curled up on the ground in agony. After all this knocking, Vera, are you trying to kill us? Did you lock us out on purpose? Don't you know how hot it is outside? Lawson kicked me fiercely again and strode into the house. My sister-in-law, caressing her belly and fanning herself, said sarcastically, "If you didn't want us here, you shouldn't have pretended to be generous, begging us to come, only to leave us out like monkeys. You scared your precious grandchild just now. What were you thinking, big sister?" My father, with his hands behind his back as if inspecting the field, looked around. My mother stuffed a piece of cured meat into my arms, urging, "Hurry up and cook this before it spoils. Your father and your brother have been craving it. They haven't eaten it in 2 days." No one cared whether my injury was serious or painful. Only my 5-year-old daughter ran over in fear, blowing on my shoulder. With his nose in the air and hands still behind his back, my father asked my sister-in-law, "Lola, are you satisfied with this house?" "Satisfied? It lacks everything. Didn't you say my big sister used to be quite wealthy?" my sister-in-law complained, pointing around the nearly empty house. Lawson, after a circle around the house with his phone in hand, asked me angrily, "Vera, what's going on here? There's not even a sofa or air conditioning. I can't even lie down to play games. Are you trying to kill us with this heat?" Funny, right after getting a call from my mom at noon, I paid 10 times the price to hire a moving company. I swiftly had all the large furniture in the house packed up and moved to a warehouse I rented. The small appliances were all moved to the wine cellar. I know them too well. They leave nothing behind wherever they go. In my past life, my sister-in-law took all my jewelry, designer clothes, bags, and cosmetics for herself. She even took my iPad to watch TV shows. Lawson monopolized my computer to play games. My parents threw away my collectibles and my daughter's toys like trash. When I objected, my father slapped me twice loudly. Lawson and my sister-in-law fanned the flames. Feeling sorry for my father's hands, my mother ran to the kitchen and handed him a rolling pin. Now, except for a bed and an air conditioner in my bedroom and a custom-made wardrobe in the hallway, the house was nearly devoid of furniture. Oh, not quite. There were also 4 small 20 centimeters high stools that I had specially prepared for them. This time, they wouldn't be able to take anything away. My father seemed to realize something, raising his hand to hit me. "You ungrateful girl, where are all the things in the house? How dare you invite us over when there's nothing here? Who gave you the courage? Having died once already, I'm no longer afraid of this bully." I deflected his descending hand. "Dad, after James left, I lost my source of income. How am I supposed to live if I don't sell things? Should I just ask you for money? The 10,000 I gave you and the 2,000 to Lawson were my last assets. Now I'm penniless. You can stay here as long as you want, but from now on, you'll have to cover your own living expenses." Lawson was the first to object. "What do you mean, you bitch? We come to your house as guests and you expect us to pay for our own meals. Are you trying to rebel, forgetting your own surname, outnumbered?" I suppressed the urge to tear his mouth apart and turned to smile at my mom and siblings. "Mom, brother, sister, does Lawson call you bitches at home too?" Lawson clenched his fists, grinding his teeth as he glared at me. My sister's face turned red. "None of your business. If you don't want to get hit, you better find a way to get another bed. There's only one bed in the house." Where are mom and dad supposed to sleep? I'm still carrying your family's child, you know. She emphasized the last sentence heavily, unconsciously straightening her back, her words already claiming the only bed in the master bedroom. After speaking, she ran straight to the master bedroom, turned on the air conditioning, and lay on the bed browsing her phone. Helplessly, I spread my hands. Like I said, I have no money, there's no extra bed, but there are blankets, you can sleep on the floor, you wicked girl. I see you're doing this on purpose, I'll beat you to death. My dad raised his hand to hit me, my mom quickly pushed me aside, pretending to keep the peace. Just hold your tongue, if you upset your dad and his heart condition flares up, I think you should stay at your mother-in-law's for a few days until your dad's better, then come back. I was secretly pleased, as this was exactly what I wanted, but I pretended to be aggrieved. This is my home, are you trying to drive me out? Your dad needs peace and quiet. Too many people around isn't good for his health. You wouldn't want anything to happen to him, right? Besides, you don't have anything at your place, and as a married daughter, you shouldn't be dependent on your parents. It's embarrassing for you and doesn't reflect well on us either. They were clearly using the excuse of caring for my dad's health to drive me out, when he would be, well, again was up to them to decide. If they got used to living there, trying to get my house back would be harder than reaching the heavens. I frowned, deeply troubled. My mom patiently brainwashed me, and eventually, with a sigh of resignation, I reluctantly agreed. Lawson, too fatigued from standing, soon gave up and sat huddled on a small stool, sweating profusely, looking like a strawberry tart in a restroom. He continued playing his game, not looking up, commanding, "You can leave, but leave the car, I need it." I didn't bother to argue, took nothing with me, and left with my daughter in high spirits. After all the commotion, it was already evening. The temperature had skyrocketed from 38 degrees during the day to 42. The duplicitous family, delighted by my imminent departure, little did they know, a half-year-long extreme heat wave was about to begin. The drama I had long anticipated was about to unfold. Want me to bring a fan in the middle of the night? I went straight with my daughter to the wine cellar, and as soon as I entered, I smelled a delicious aroma. My daughter hopped and skipped happily to her grandmother. "Grandma, it smells wonderful. Meng Meng loves the dishes you cook." Grandma smiled broadly and picked her up. Meng Meng really knows how to make Grandma happy. I stepped back outside to make sure I couldn't smell the food or hear any noises before re-entering. Grandma had cooked a plate of ribs and was stewing beef with potatoes. Grandpa had also washed his hands and was showing me his day's work. In such a short time, he had used sheet metal and steel plates to separate the living area into a kitchen, dining room, 2 bedrooms, and an entertainment room. It looked even more like a home now. During dinner, I opened the camera app on my phone, since I was alone with my child. Sometimes, when I have urgent matters and must leave the house, I can only leave my daughter at home, to ensure her safety. I have installed cameras in every room. However, when my parents mentioned they were coming over, I took down all the cameras except for those in the living room and the master bedroom. I even switched to miniature cameras, which I hid on top of the curtain rods. As soon as I turned on the video, I heard Lawson complaining about being starving and urging my mom to hurry up and cook. My mom scurried to the kitchen, rummaging through the cabinets in a flurry. My in-laws, seeing me glued to my phone and grinning, couldn't help but look over curiously. Just then, my mom stormed out of the kitchen, fuming and green-faced, exclaiming, "That girl has gone mad with poverty, she even sold the pots. How am I supposed to cook?" My dad and brother had no sympathy. All they cared about was that they were hungry and there needed to be food on the table. In reality, I had left them plenty, half a bag of rice, half a bag of flour, half a bucket of oil, and a packet of noodles. Knowing my mom, with that much supply, she wouldn't think of replenishing it right away. Lawson grumbled, "Then hurry up and buy some. Do you want to starve your son and your precious grandson?" My dad, puffing on a cigarette and dropping ashes on the floor, yelled at her, "What are you waiting for? Do you need me to carry you there in a palanquin?" All right, I'm going now, I'm going," my mom replied, cautiously edging along the wall as she left. My mom was too naive. Trying to appear good in front of me while not daring to offend my dad, she attempted to join him in suppressing me. hoping for a shred of pity from him, to be held in higher regard. After all these years, she still hadn't realized that whenever I was not home, she was always the one being oppressed and living on thin ice. Serves her right, I thought to myself, as I took a big spoonful of mashed potatoes. The in-laws exchanged a heavy look, and my mother-in-law spoke. Vera, isn't this a bit too much? I smiled and replied, Mom, they are the excessive ones. Don't you know their true colors by now? They're clearly after the house this time. My in-laws immediately tensed up. I quickly reassured them, don't worry, this house is your son's hard work. I won't let them succeed. Just watch the drama unfold. After dinner, the in-laws played with my daughter while I quickly washed the dishes and organized the storage area, energized by the cool, stocked cellar. My mother-in-law offered to help, but I told her and my father-in-law to go to bed early with my daughter. They had been quite worn out these past few days. Suddenly, my phone rang, and it was already midnight. I answered to hear my mom's anxious voice. Vera, is there not even a fan in your house? Even a handheld one would do. How is it getting even hotter? Your brother and his wife are resting, and we can't go to their room to enjoy the air conditioning. Your dad and I can't stand the heat. Order an air conditioner online to be delivered tomorrow, and for now, get a fan from your mother-in-law's house. My dad sighed at just the right moment. Your dad is about to suffer heatstroke. Hurry up. Glancing at the weather forecast, which showed temperatures soaring to 45 degrees Celsius, I yawned and said nonchalantly, Mom, look at the time, it's the middle of the night, and my mother-in-law lives in the suburbs. There's no way to get a car to the city at this hour. If Lawson had let me take the car today, I would definitely have brought you a fan overnight. These vampires only remember me when they want to feast and revel. Every time there are difficulties, they call on me for help. Unexpectedly, Lawson was right there too. Vera, what do you mean? Are you blaming me? He asked. I didn't hold back in my response. If not you, then who? Our parents are old, and Dad has a heart condition. Shouldn't you, as their son, willingly give up the air-conditioned room for them? After saying that, I added forcefully, if you don't, it's simply unfilial. Previously, they used to manipulate me morally with that accusation. If I didn't hand over my salary, I was labeled unfilial, and they would go as far as to cause a scene at my workplace, jeopardizing my job. If I couldn't provide a dowry of 1 million, I was deemed unfilial, and they would hide the household registration book to prevent me from getting married. If I didn't transfer the property to Lawson, I was unfilial, and they pressured me to do so on the 7th day after my husband's death. Lawson, furious, shouted at me, what right do you, a useless financial burden, have to criticize me? I'm the only hope for the family line, and if I get overheated, what then? I scoffed. To continue your lazy lineage and succeed your lack of achievements, with your inferior genes. Do we really need to continue that? It's just a drag on society. Vera, are you looking for trouble? Dare to say that again, he challenged. I yawned exaggeratedly, throwing his harsh words right back at him. It's too late, I'm going to sleep. At worst, the four of you could squeeze in together. With that, I hung up the phone, turning on the surveillance on my phone. I saw Lawson fuming by the bed, his face turning blue, while his sister-in-law covered her head with a blanket. My parents stood by their bed, arms crossed, with the air conditioning on, temporarily alleviating the sweltering heat outside. Perhaps my words had an effect, as they remained at an impasse. Finally, his sister-in-law couldn't take it anymore. She emerged from under the covers, angrily saying, what do you all want standing here? Do you really want to squeeze in together to sleep? Let me tell you, no way. Lawson didn't utter a word but sneakily glanced at our parents' expressions. My dad, who usually carries himself with such authority at home, was not used to being confronted like this and was panting heavily. Seeing my dad about to explode, his sister-in-law hurriedly played her trump card, her voice trembling, don't forget, I'm carrying a child. Immediately, my dad dared not move. His cheek muscles twitched violently, and his gaze at my sister-in-law darkened. I could already imagine the kind of life she would lead after giving birth. I wondered if she could endure until then. The following day, unable to bear the heat any longer, my parents gritted their teeth and went to find a hotel to stay in. The next day, they returned. My dad, hands on his hips, was cooling his face with a small electric fan. My mom, always hardworking and physically robust, carried a new electric fan, a large bag of vegetables and fruits, an electric rice cooker, an iron pot, and a folding table. At that moment, the temperature was still hovering around 45 degrees Celsius. It was their last chance to gather supplies as the temperature was set to soar to 50 degrees by nightfall, nearing the limits of human survival and making it dangerous to go outside. Even in the hottest times here, it usually only reached 42 degrees. Tomorrow, everyone would realize the abnormal weather conditions and would start panic buying, causing prices to skyrocket and supplies to become scarce. Given the many mouths they had to feed, including 2 big eaters, the remaining supplies at home would last them at most 4 or 5 days. Indeed, the next day, the community chat groups exploded with discussions about the abnormal weather, and everyone was anxious. The phone screen displayed an external temperature of 50 degrees. A resident shared a video in the community group showing the streets almost empty of pedestrians, scattered with the bodies of stray cats and dogs that had succumbed to the heat, along with several blurred figures of homeless people who had dried out. My parents couldn't see the messages in the homeowners group, but from the floor-to-ceiling windows of our home, we could see the supermarket downstairs was swamped with people. My dad stood by the window, mocking those panicking, believing the weather would return to normal in a couple of days. It wasn't until the 7th day that he realized the severity of the situation when he saw online that the authorities had already issued continuous statements and activated a Level 1 disaster response alert. By then, our food supplies had run out and the air conditioner had broken down after running non-stop. The temperature had inexplicably risen to 60 degrees. This time, it was Lawson who video called me, not only asking me to send food back but also to find someone to fix the air conditioner. He had just angrily called out my name when he froze. "Sis, are you drinking a cold Coke? How do you still have ice cream?" Because at the moment the call connected, my daughter was playfully complaining to her grandmother, "The water is so cold, it's freezing my cute little tongue." I chuckled awkwardly. "Oh, you caught me. Yes, cold drinks, chilled watermelon, and oh, this ice cream is just too refreshing. Grandpa, Grandma, come say hi to my parents." Grandpa sipped his premium Mai Tai while Grandma poured juice for my daughter, smiling warmly at the camera. "Hello, dear in-laws." My parents' faces were as dark as the bottom of a pot, as if to say, "We're nearly dying from the heat and hunger. What's there to be happy about?" Lawson, drooling with envy, chuckled. "You even have cold watermelon. That's great, sis. Please send us some food quickly. I haven't eaten in 2 days. And the air conditioner is also broken." The 4 of them were drenched in sweat, their faces flushed, huddled in front of a fan, constantly fanning themselves. I stuffed another big piece of watermelon into my mouth and mumbled, "I can't make it back. Bro, didn't you see everything outside is melting? Going outside means getting cooked alive. How much are you willing to pay for someone to risk their life to fix your air conditioner? What should we do then, sis? We are cold and hungry. You can't just watch us freeze and starve to death." I took a lick of my ice cream, casually mentioning, "Doesn't your house have central air conditioning? The main switch is the 3rd one from the left in the fuse box. Why didn't you say so earlier?" I smirked disdainfully at Lawson, who also forced a sheepish smile. Then I told my mom to turn on the air conditioning immediately. As she stood up, holding her head and swaying slightly, it was clear she was a bit affected by the heat. She staggered to the door and opened the fuse box. "Okay, it's done, son, it'll be cool in a moment." My mom glanced at me, sensing something was amiss. "Vera, I've been to your in-laws' place, and this room doesn't look like their house. Why are you still using lights in broad daylight?" I can't be bothered with you right now. Our food is all gone. You better come back and bring us some," Lawson also urged. "Yeah, sis, you're my real sister. You can't just ignore me. Take a taxi. Keep the air conditioning on. It's just an hour's ride." I switched the camera to show a corner of the storage area, piled with snacks, instant food, fresh vegetables, and fruits, for heads immediately crowded around the camera, their eyes glowing a faint green like starved wild beasts. I shrugged helplessly and said, "I've got so much food here I can't even finish it all, and I'd love to share it with you, but I can't make it back. Don't you know all transport has been shut down? Just hang in there a bit longer, who knows, the weather might clear up in a couple of days. Finally losing his patience, my dad slammed a small electric fan on the ground. You wretched girl, are you trying to rile us up? I'm telling you, you have to crawl back here today with food, or else you're no daughter of mine. It seemed the temperature in the room was gradually cooling down. However, my electricity account only had a few dozen yuan left, barely enough for 2 days. I took a satisfying gulp of ice-cold Coke. Dad, instead of threatening me, why don't you and your beloved son take advantage of the remaining supplies in the community and go get some vegetables? Before my dad could scold me again, I hung up the phone, extinguishing the fire with the surveillance video on my phone. 11. Frustrated, my dad turned his anger towards my mom. Can't you see the storm coming? Why didn't you stock up more food? How could you be so useless? Go out and buy some more now, Mom. You too, knowing that supplies are short. Why don't you plan ahead? You finished all the rice and flour in a few days. My mom, who was blamed by the two who ate the most and complained the loudest, had tears welling up in her eyes. It's 60 degrees outside. Do you want me to die? At just 60 degrees she complained about dying, yet when it hit 70 degrees, she still forced me to go out for food. Seeing that we now had air conditioning at home, my sister-in-law generously offered her son umbrella. Mom, just use the umbrella, it won't feel so hot, and bring back some snacks for me, your beloved grandson loves them, Lawson also urged. Mom, please go, look at me, I'm getting thin from hunger, cherishing her son and grandson. My mom gritted her teeth and went out with the umbrella. Incredibly, she actually found food, a whole half-box of instant noodles. None of the three at home cared about my mom. They snatched the noodles from her hands, which were blistered from the sun, tore the packages open violently, and started shoveling them into their mouths. My dad and Lawson, cooled by tap water, devoured 4 packs each. My sister-in-law too. Watching them eat ravenously was truly nauseating. After my mom forcefully drank a large cup of water to catch her breath, only 6 packs of noodles were left. Her face pale, she reached for a pack but my dad slapped her hand away. Her wrist drooped as if broken, and she winced in pain. My dad tossed her 2 flavoring sachets from the noodle packs. Just mix them with some water and drink that. My mom wiped her tears in the kitchen while sipping the flavored water. 12. Another day passed, and Lawson called me while I was eating a tomahawk steak. They huddled together, holding onto the fan, and couldn't help licking their lips, their faces swollen from the heat, eyes red with blood vessels. They panted heavily. Sis, where exactly are you? Please, send us some food, I'm starving. Sis, how could they not be hungry? 6 packs of noodles, cooking 2 a day, with my dad and Lawson eating most of it, my sister-in-law managing to grab a few noodles, and my mom left with just the soup. After today's meal, they would only have 2 packs left. I briefly replied, is there anything else? If not, don't interrupt my meal. That's when Lawson remembered the pressing matter and hurriedly said, Sis, what's going on? The AC's stopped working. Oh, we must have run out of electricity credit, then you should recharge it quickly. Holding the steak, I looked at him seriously. Aren't you overheating your brain? Haven't I told you I have no money? My dad couldn't stand it anymore and started yelling again, damn girl. Who do you think you're fooling? You have money to buy all that food and drink but no money to pay the electricity bill. I think you just don't want to spend money on your parents and brother. Don't forget, you are my child, and what's yours is our family's. You ungrateful daughter, go pay the bill now. Believe it or not, I'm not the one suffering from the heat. Besides, the electricity rates have been skyrocketing recently. You better deposit more at once. We don't know how long this hot weather will last. They stayed silent. If there's nothing else, I'm going to hang up. Finally, my sister-in-law showed some sense. Sister, wait, we'll pay, just tell us the account to pay into. Oh, that's no use to you. I need facial recognition to make payments from here. She's just a scammer, trying to con me out of my money, my dad exclaimed. I'm telling you, you little mongrel, you won't scam a penny from me. Fine, now even if I wanted to pay, I won't. Let the heat kill you, old man. I decisively hung up the phone, curious to see how long they could keep up their stubbornness. Before I even finished my steak, my mom called again, the same old tactic. If being tough doesn't work, try a softer approach. My mom was crying, her sunburnt skin cracking. Vera, your father has a weak heart, don't make him angry. I'm sending you money now. Please pay the electricity bill. No, didn't you just say I was scamming? Vera, I'm begging you. I burped. If you're asking for a favor, show some sincerity. I might reluctantly help you, but you must agree to one condition. My mom, relieved, smiled. Okay, tell me, what's the condition? I put down the steak and stared straight into the camera, enunciating every word. Kneel down and slap yourselves in the face, each of you 21 times, just like you did to my husband back then. It has to be harsh. They finally realized I was seeking revenge, in my parents' eyes. My useless brother was everything. When my husband and I were dating, not only did my parents take over my salary, but they also shamelessly asked him for money under various pretexts. Lawson, lazy and inept, would take the money from my parents and immediately squander it. Growing up, I always took the blame and beatings for him, did his laundry, cooked, and cleaned. As an adult, I became his ATM. I thought getting married would free me from this family. When we were planning the wedding, they did everything to obstruct it. They wanted my husband to come up with $1 million in dowry to buy a house for Lawson to get married. My husband was in the liquor business, which was just taking off. He needed money for stock, social obligations, and networking. He didn't have that much. My mom had a terrible idea for us to transfer the mortgage on our apartment to Lawson. The apartment was worth $3 million, and naturally, my husband refused. My parents then hid the family register to prevent us from registering our marriage. Desperate, my husband scraped together $300,000 and presented it to my parents. They didn't want to lose the $300,000, nor did they want to miss out on the additional $700,000. In a fit of anger and to humiliate my husband, my dad brutally slapped him 7 times. These 7 slaps are to remind you that you still owe our family $700,000, my father struck. And so did my mother, giving my husband 7 slaps, followed by Lawson. At that moment, my heart broke, and I cried and begged my parents to stop, saying I wouldn't go through with the marriage. My husband held me against his chest, silencing me. When my husband led me out of that dilapidated tile house, he laughed loudly. Wife, I've finally pulled you out of this hellhole. We got married, and I completely cut off contact with my family, but the good times didn't last. A year ago, my husband unfortunately passed away due to illness. On the 7th day after my husband's death, they somehow got my address, came over, and demanded that I transfer the house to Lawson, because I still owed them $700,000. My parents' exact words were, I always knew James wouldn't live long. And now your brother is your only hope. If you run into trouble in the future, you'll still need him. Be smart and quickly transfer the house to your brother, spending money to avert disaster. If he had been willing to pay $1 million then, maybe he wouldn't have died so soon. Serves him right. He occupied my son's house for so many years for nothing. Good riddance. I tolerated their favoritism and abuse for many years. But they should not have insulted and slandered my husband like that. I was so angry it hurt my chest. I was going crazy. I shouted at them to shut up, and rushed into the kitchen. Before I could reach for the kitchen knife, my mother-in-law, her eyes red, grabbed the knife before me and chased my parents out of my house. After that, I sold the house and moved, but I stayed in the same neighborhood, just in a different building. I couldn't leave because my husband left behind a wine cellar here for me and my daughter to survive on. 21 slaps, not one less. I'll give you 1 minute to decide who goes first. I knew they were furious, wishing they could kill me right then. Ironically, their fate was now in my hands. Under the dual assault of extreme heat and hunger, my mother was the first to bend her knee. She slapped herself repeatedly, uttering words of repentance for my husband. My in-laws stood by, wiping away tears. Then it was Lawson's turn. Even now he tried to cheat and skimp, lightly tapping his face. I casually tore open a bag of individually wrapped braised chicken legs, took a bite. Not good enough, do it again, until he bled from the corner of his mouth. I nodded in satisfaction. My father hesitated to start, and my mother pleaded, Vera, your father has a bad heart, maybe let it go. A bad heart? Don't pretend. His heart is harder than anyone's. He must slap harder than you all. My father had never been so humiliated, especially by me, whom he never valued. The hatred in his eyes looked like it could tear a person apart. but watching, I felt a twisted pleasure. Don't glare at me like that, start now, and don't make me wait too long, or I still won't pay, and Mom and Lawson's efforts would be in vain. Eventually, my father gave in and slapped himself loudly and quickly. I laughed loudly, applauding him. My mother hurriedly hung up the phone and transferred 5,000 yuan to me. The electricity bill was settled, but their bigger crisis was food. They didn't call me again. I monitored their every move through surveillance. It became our daily entertainment. On the 10th day, the outdoor temperature had already soared to 70 degrees Celsius. They had been out of food for 2 days, and Lawson, unable to bear the hunger, asked my mother to go out and find food again. This time, my mother absolutely refused to go out. My father scolded her harshly and, together with Lawson, forcefully pushed her out of the house. If you can't find food, don't bother coming back, just die outside. In my previous life, my daughter and I died tragically on this very day. Just thinking about that scene makes me shiver uncontrollably. By the next day, my mother had not returned. She really did die out there, driven mad by hunger. My father showed no remorse for my mother's death. He swallowed his saliva, a hint of regret momentarily crossing his face. 2 days later, my father found a small shoebox in the shoe cabinet that was used to pack shoes for Meng Meng. He tore off a large piece with his mouth and chewed it vigorously. As he chewed, something suddenly occurred to him, his eyes brightening frighteningly as he rushed towards the master bedroom. Upon opening the door, he saw Lawson and my younger sister secretly sharing a packet of instant noodles in bed. It was something my sister-in-law had hidden while they were frantically eating noodles. Angry and hungry, my father lost his sanity and began beating my sister-in-law mercilessly. Lawson, holding onto his waist, cried out, "Dad, stop, she'll die if you keep hitting her." My father blurted out, "Better if she dies, we'll have meat to eat then, an unborn fetus is highly nourishing." My sister-in-law clutched her belly, crying and begging piteously. Lawson froze, his expression complex, as if making a significant decision. In just a few moments, he gradually let go of his hold. I hurriedly turned off my phone, unable to utter a word as I faced my in-laws. After that incident, I never dared to open the surveillance on my phone again. The extreme hot weather did not last half a year as the experts had predicted. When winter officially arrived, the temperature began to rise. By the end of October, the climate had returned to normal. The government organized teams to search and rescue survivors house by house. We had no plans to go out yet, as the saying goes. After a major disaster comes a great epidemic. Although technology has advanced and epidemics are not rampant, we still need to be cautious with our old and young family members. On the 3rd day, I received a call from the police to verify the situation. They only mentioned that they had found a body and various human remains in my house. He didn't go into too much detail, probably to avoid frightening me. But I understood, even the last complete body had decomposed over time. I had no interest in knowing who had survived. In the end, they all paid the price for their misdeeds. Following the advice of relevant authorities, I authorized their collective cremation and burial, not to burden the nation unnecessarily. When spring comes next year, I will walk in the sunshine with my in-laws and daughter. Our family of 4 will live together happily. For the rest of our lives, all will be bright and smooth.